Live from the studios of WPDE News Channel 15, the runoff debate between the Republican candidates for the 7th Congressional District, Andre Bauer and Tom Rice.
Good evening. In 3 days, voters will choose between the two Republicans who want the nomination to be the first representative of the new 7th Congressional District in Washington. The winner will face the Democratic nominee in November, and the winner of the general election will be your voice in Washington on issues like health care, funding of highways, port dredging, foreign policy, and a lot more. I think a debate's a lot like a job interview. The candidates are applying to work for you. So if you plan to vote in the Republican primary Tuesday, listen carefully tonight. So Tuesday, you can be sure you cast the ballot for the man you think is best qualified. I'd like to welcome our two candidates, Tom Rice, current chairman of the Horry County Council, Andre Bauer, the former lieutenant governor of South Carolina. Gentlemen, the rules tonight are pretty simple. There really are no rules. I'm going to ask some questions just to you and just to you. Other questions, both of you will have a chance to answer. For the most part, I hope this is going to be an in-depth discussion of the issues, but I will remind you, I have a lot of ground to cover tonight, and the quicker we get through questions, the quicker we'll get to everything we have to cover. I want to start off by talking about something I've heard from a lot of viewers, and that is that this campaign is getting a little ugly out there, especially if you're watching TV and seeing the two commercials you guys are running right now. I want to put up a quote from a woman who contacted us. She said, "I would like to know why so much time and money is spent on negative campaigning when the voters need to have facts on what the candidates see as their goals for the betterment of the district. I'm tired of hitting the mute button when political ads come on." I took a look at both of your commercials today, and Mr. Bauer, you accused Mr. Rice of being moderate, raising property taxes and pushing a tax increase, and Mr. Rice, you accuse Mr. Bauer of raising taxes, using the office of lieutenant governor for personal gain, and you say 70% of the money raised came from outside political interest groups. I'm going to give you the first opportunity. We decided in a coin toss earlier tonight that you would have the first opportunity to answer the question. Why is this getting so negative, and what do you say about the accusations Mr. Bauer's made toward you?
Well, we didn't want it to get negative. The day after the primary election, Mr. Bauer came up with some very negative ads, and he's continued those throughout. He's modified them a little bit. He throws up repeated allegations that there is no basis for. Today, we started an ad that I do consider to be negative, but the difference is my ads are true. My ads are based on his history. The ads that he's throwing up have no basis in fact.
Well, if they have no basis in fact, Tom's saying it, not me. I didn't accuse him of being a moderate. He said it himself. I used the footage of when he said it. And so I don't know how you can say I'm accusing him of being a moderate when, in fact, he said he was a moderate himself. He said he didn't raise taxes when he did. He also said he wasn't in favor of raising the debt ceiling, but in fact, in a debate, he said if I could get projects funded in my district, I would be willing to support that. 8 of the candidates in the Republican primary said absolutely not. He was the only one that said that. And so my ad only talks about the fact that he's raised taxes, the fact that he's willing to raise the debt ceiling, and the fact that he's a moderate. And so I don't think there's anything negative about that. It's clearly sticking to the facts. Now, he's gone after me and used personal things like I sped. I don't think there's a person in the state that doesn't know I have sped. Look, I have broken a dish. There is absolutely no question. It was 7 years ago. I profusely apologize. I have tried to watch what I do more and more. I served in an office in my 20s, and one time I stubbed my toe, twice I stubbed my toe, and so it has haunted me. I hate that that's happened because I worked so hard for seniors and really wanted to leave a legacy of what I tried. My passion was to change the lives of the elderly people in this state, and part of it will never be that because I made a mistake, a dumb mistake, and sped, and it has haunted me, and so I hate it, I regret it, but I hope that this campaign will be about the difference and who's going to lead and how they're going to lead in Washington and the votes they'll take. And so all of my campaigning has been, here's what I believe, here's what Mr. Rice believes. It has been absolutely nothing personal.
Mr. Rice?
Nobody cares about the fact that he sped, at least I don't. I mean, I guess 105 miles an hour on the interstate's a little excessive. But what I do care about is that he uses influence to get out of the tickets. What I do care about is when he ran 3 stoplights in Columbia in a row with a policeman following, he acted so aggressively with the policeman that the policeman pulled a gun on him. I mean, that doesn't sound conservative to me. I don't know how it sounds to y'all. I have said before that I'm a little bit more moderate than Jim DeMint. I agree with 99% of what he does and 99% of what he says. But I'm honestly, in the ranking, I'm probably a little bit more moderate. 95% of the people out there are. I think I'm a lot more conservative than Andre Bauer is. And Andre, you know, one of these allegations you make in here, and you just said it. You just said that I said in the Georgetown debate that I wanted to raise, I was agreeable to raising the debt ceiling, and you cite this article right here. And
I didn't cite the article. I was at the debate.
Your website.
I was at the debate. I saw it
your
firsthand,
website
Tom.
cites this article right here. Please show me where in that article it says I want to raise the debt ceiling.
Tom?
I looked at the tape again. I never said that I wanted to raise the debt ceiling. The question was not about the debt ceiling.
Okay, what was the question, Tom?
I don't think you know the difference between the deficit and the debt ceiling.
Okay, well, so what was the question, Tom?
No,
explain yourself, because you're defensive that you didn't.
You tell me the difference between the deficit and the debt ceiling, because that's what the question was about. It had nothing to do with
hey,
the
you're
debt
having to defend it, not me. I know
gentlemen,
I did. I was with the
gentlemen.
other.
The show that we're preempting tonight is called Shark Tank. I don't want this to become a Shark Tank.
The point of it is, it's a lie. It's a lie. This is the article he cites. It's not in there. He says that I favored Myrtle Beach raising the property tax. I never said that, never did that. This is the article he cites out of the state paper. Show me in there where it says that I'm in favor of raising property taxes.
Tom, did you
it's
not
another
vote?
lie.
Did you not vote to raise property taxes? And did you not cast a vote to raise property taxes? I'm asking you a question, clean and simple. Yes or no?
This is the allegation that you made about the city of Myrtle Beach, that I was in favor of raising the property. I'm not on Myrtle Beach's city council. You said.
Did the county? Did you vote to raise the county property taxes?
After the voters passed a referendum.
That is a yes.
After the voters passed a referendum, before I got on council, county council put a referendum on the ballot asking the voters if they favored a 0.6 mil tax increase to fund the bus service. When I got on council, I didn't want to do that. So I went and found savings and cut what the voters asked us to do in half. I didn't raise the taxes, the voters did that, and I cut it in half.
Tom,
yes,
you
sir.
cast the vote. The voters did not cast the vote. So if you are hiding behind...
The voters voted in November. They absolutely did.
Hey, well then if they understand that you thought it was okay to raise taxes on them, you explain it to them. I don't have to explain it.
Let's move on. Let's talk about some of the issues.
Half-truths and lies. All of it half-truths.
Well, it's a straight-up question. Did you vote to raise taxes for the county? Did you vote to raise taxes?
I just told you. I cut what the voters asked me to do.
No, you didn't. You have done a typical politician. You're saying everything around except that you did cast a vote to raise taxes in the county. And you will not answer the question because you know. I just
did 3 times.
You know you raised taxes. Look, it's easy to.
Gentlemen, let's let the viewers decide.
I want you to answer
Let's move along.
There's the article about the city of Myrtle Beach that he cites in this ad right here. He says, Tom praised the Myrtle Beach City Council for raising property taxes. Number 6, the state, June 25th, 2008. There it is right there. Where does it say that?
You want me to read the article right now?
Let's not read the article right now. I want to move on. I wanted to get this sniping out of the way at the beginning because I want the voters to hear where you guys stand on the issues. We know that the campaigns are running some ads right now that many voters, as we could tell from the emails we got to the newsroom, consider negative. I wanted you two to have a chance to address them. I think we've adequately addressed them. Let's move along, okay? The next question I want to talk to you guys about is creating jobs, the economy. That seems to be the issue that's really driving elections all across the country right now. Mr. Bauer, specifically, how would you bring jobs to the PD? How would you bring jobs to Horry County in a time when jobs are hard to come by?
Absolutely. Number one, we need an intermodal port in South Carolina. I went to Abu Dhabi, met with the folks at JAFSA who have actually already bought land, but they bought it in a different area of the state and they've never done anything. The leadership has not moved that project forward. So I'd like to go to the chairman of county council. I hope we'll be able to work together after Tuesday and say, Mr. Chairman, help me with this project. I'd like to go to the city or any other area in this district and do all we can to take a rural area and make it an intermodal port where we take valuable piece of land immediately from rail, move goods to a central area where we can have manufacturing, where we can have distribution, and have that, as well as I think we need free trade zones or more free trade zones in this district. We need to do all we can to lower taxes for small business owners. Every time I try to do something in business, whether it's regulation, litigation, or taxation, it discourages me from wanting to create new jobs. And things like Obamacare, again, have made it so difficult for anybody who want to take that gamble or that risk to open new businesses. I have been involved in some businesses here in the Grand Strand, and we've been very fortunate and blessed that they're doing well. I saw one of the commercials running on your show a little while ago. But what I'd look at as an overall plan, and then I'd work with the governor, I'd work with the Department of Commerce, as I did when I was worked for Governor Sanford. And when he couldn't go, I would go many times to companies like Nanya Plastics. Those folks have an opportunity to do so much more, but we've got to create an environment where when they're looking all over the world at broadening their companies, this needs to be the best place in the world to do business.
How do you bring jobs here?
Well, I think nationally that we've been hemorrhaging jobs for decades. And I don't think it's rocket science as to why that's happening. Sure, there's cheaper labor in other places in the world, and we'll never, or at least I hope we never compete in that arena. But where we can compete, where we've priced ourselves out of the market, is in taxes particularly. We got the highest corporate tax rate in the world, in the industrialized world. You know, if you can manufacture a product and make a profit here and keep 60 cents on the dollar versus manufacturing it overseas and keep 80 cents on the dollar, what are you going to do? You know, what would you do? Of course you're going to go where you can keep the most of your money if you can choose. The regulatory burden that we place on our businesses is so high, and that's expensive. You know, when you have to check with FEMA and you have to check with EPA and you have to check with the Army Corps of Engineers before you can do anything in terms of a business, you know, that runs the cost up. And if we want to be business friendly, you know, if we want to be competitive, we've got to be business friendly. We say we're business friendly, but we're really not. We've got to look at cutting government regulation. We've got to fight additional government regulation, and we've got to cut the tax. That's nationally. Locally, you know, again, we got to look at what it takes to make us competitive. Here at Horry County, when I ran for county council, I ran on job creation. Our Economic Development Corporation had been doing very little for a long time. We'd been funding it to the tune of $200,000 a year for a long time. We looked at what it took to make us competitive. We funded a plan. We put it in place last year. And since January 1st, we've announced 350 new jobs. You know, the 3 years before I was on county council, Horry County was producing an average of 106 jobs a year, while Charleston, Greenville, Columbia were producing an average of about 1,300. This year, so far, we've announced 350 new jobs. Now, I know Mr. Bauer's going to jump in and say that those W-2s hadn't started yet, but you can't snap your fingers and make it happen overnight. Most of those jobs, 200 or more of them, will be here before the end of the year. And the rest of them, we have agreements with these companies. Any incentives we give them, if they don't produce the jobs, they pay the incentives back. The rest of them, the Avcraft deal was over a 5-year period. I do want to throw in one thing. He said he wanted to cut business taxes, but he was the deciding vote twice on what they call property tax relief. And what that really was a 1 cent rise in your sales taxes, a 20% rise in your sales taxes. That amounts to about $500 million a year in South Carolina. And that was property tax relief for people who own principal residences, but it wasn't for people who own second homes. It wasn't for people who don't own homes, and it wasn't for businesses. You see, businesses don't qualify for that principal residence relief. And also, so their customers have to pay more sales taxes, and they have to pay more sales taxes when they buy things. That makes us less competitive, it costs us jobs, and it's exactly against what he's saying he's for now.
Let's give you a chance to respond.
Great. Number one, Mr. Rice, for many, many months, has been talking about these 300 jobs. And I think it's great that the Grand Strand Daily actually did a story on it. I didn't think to test it, I just believed him. And they said, wait a minute, we've heard this before. Avcraft took a bunch of money, said they were going to create all these jobs, said they were going to pay all these taxes, and they didn't. They're getting an unbelievable rate to use the airport, which they're not paying their fair share. If you ride through the parking lot, most of the tags are out of state. They're not even hiring South Carolinians, and they haven't produced the jobs they've said they would time and time again. They've had all kinds of legal battles, but the county continues to give them more money. And there's now a rift within the county, so much so that 2 of Tom's fellow council members have endorsed me this week. And think about this. If he doesn't win, they still have to serve on council with him for another 3 years. That's how much they feel about what's going on in council. They feel it has become nothing but political since he decided to run 6 months ago, 6 months into the job, and they're frustrated, so much so that they came out and took a big leap of faith to do that because they're frustrated with the leadership of what's going on with the county council chairman. But to date, we're talking about $1.8 million that's been grabbed up to supposedly bring all these jobs. 10 jobs have been created. We keep hearing all these jobs, only 10 jobs have been created. So again, I hear a whole lot of talk, but not a whole lot of substance. As far as going after me on the 1 cent sales tax increase, I was the lieutenant governor of the state who broke a tie, and the tie was, do we want to allocate property tax relief for people that are hurting? Your folks that are watching this show, there are a lot of seniors that the property taxes have gotten so high, they couldn't pay the bill anymore. Now you substantially have a reduction for homeowners. Yes, we shifted to a 1 cent sales tax increase, but guess who's paying that? Well, 30% right off the bat are paid for by tourists that are using our beaches, using our roads, using our parks, and they should have to pay their fair share. And so I always will favor a consumption tax over any other tax any day. That's why I favor a flat tax or a fair tax any day over the other one. So yes, I broke the tie-breaking vote to lower your property taxes, and if that's a bad thing, I'll wear that as a badge of honor.
It hits Horry County and Georgetown County.
This is the last chance of the rebuttal.
It hits Horry County and Georgetown County particularly hard. And of course, Mr. Bauer doesn't know that because he's only lived here for 6 months. But the truth is, it has cost us, you know, second homes particularly. The second home market is very important in Horry and Georgetown County. My neighbor who has a second home, his property taxes are 4 times what mine are. Because the school board now can only, for property taxes, tax second homes and tax businesses. It's cost us construction jobs, it's hurt contractors, it's hurt business, it makes us less competitive.
I want to go to this, Mr. Bauer. Let me go to this, and I want to ask you about that. Since he brought it up, let's talk about it. That's been a criticism that's been thrown at you. When I asked you this question in a debate, you jumped on the media for asking you this question. But since it's been brought up, did you move to this district just to run for this office, or would you be here anyway, and how long have you lived here? All
right, number one, he says 6 months. He's getting his math wrong. He knows that, but he likes to use that. 6 months is how long he was in office before he decided to run for another office. I bought a home here when I was still lieutenant governor, the November of the year before I got out of office, so getting ready to be 2 years. I had been spending time here for years, and I decided when I left state government I wanted to move to the coast, and I wanted to get back into the private sector after having been in public office. And since I moved here, I've bought a lot of homes, fixed them up and sold them, which was exactly my goal. This seat did not even exist when I moved to Myrtle Beach. Matter of fact, the last lieutenant governor cast the tie-breaking vote, even put it in this district. It was going to be down in Berkeley County so that Larry Grooms could have that seat. It wasn't even going to include this district. But you know, the one thing that really I've heard more and more on the campaign trail is I have people coming up to me. I spoke in Pauley's the other night to a room full of people where he was supposed to be there and bailed out on. But I said, raise your hands if you're from here. And about 15% of a room full of several hundred people raised their hand. I said, well, you too must be carpetbaggers. The reason why we have this district, Tim, is because so many people wanted this quality of life. They wanted to be a part of this community. Tom Keegan was a great member of the South Carolina legislature. I served with him. He's not from here. So are we going to say that anybody that moves here that's not from here shouldn't be able to vote, shouldn't be able to own a business? Mr. Rice, I don't think he would want to turn down the many thousands of people that have moved here that aren't from here that want to be a part of this community. So Mr. Rice is not actually from here either. We were both born in Charleston. He's been here longer than I, that is true. But I can tell you, it doesn't matter how long you've lived somewhere, it's where your heart is and how much you're willing to work for that district. And folks know I will work and work and work. And even my adversaries will tell you there is nobody that will outwork me. I love and care about this state and this district very much, and I will be there every day in Washington, not looking out for one little business group in downtown Myrtle Beach, but looking out for everybody in all 8 counties.
I want to just give you a 30-second rebuttal, and then he can have 30 seconds after your next question.
Friends, that all sounds very nice and all. But over the last 15 years, Mr. Bauer's lived in 5 different places to run for 5 different offices. He quit halfway through his second House term to run for Senate. He quit halfway through his first full Senate term to run for Lieutenant Governor. He is an opportunistic politician, and he's moved in here to try to get this new congressional seat. Pure and simple, straight out.
Mr. Rice, I want to ask you, one of the chief criticisms Mr. Bauer touched on is that you were barely in office before you decided to run for this seat. You even told me on this very desk that you weren't going to seek another office. Do you just want a higher office, or do you just want to be in office, or what's your plan here?
Well, honestly, in answer to that day, you know, this office didn't exist when I ran for county council chairman. I had no plans to run for this office. I was approached by good friends who asked me. They said they thought I'd make a great candidate and a great person to represent the entire district and to represent the entire nation. My background as a CPA and a lawyer fits very well with the economic issues that we face, with the debt and the deficit, the economy and jobs. I think my entire professional career has led me to this, and that was the reason I decided to do it. I had no intention, I hadn't even thought about this office when I ran for county council chairman, and I had no intention to seek this office until I was approached by my friends, took it to my wife, we prayed about it, and we made this decision and charged forward.
I'll give you 30 seconds.
That's great, because Mr. Rice's allegations that I moved here and to run for office, I actually moved here before he was on county council. I owned real estate here to move here before he was on county council. So he says the seat didn't exist when he ran for county council, so that's great. So he has acknowledged the seat didn't exist when I actually moved here before he became chairman of county council. It shows, again, use the facts as you want them, even if they aren't really facts.
All right. I want to move to a question now that kind of involves my business. Recently, the Charleston television stations began enforcing FCC rules that were created back in the 70s that require Myrtle Beach stations be removed from cable systems in Georgetown County. Well, a lot of businesses and business owners have spoken out to stop. Time Warner has moved on to remove all local stations from their HD tier and providing only Charleston stations. This is a major safety issue, we feel, for severe weather and hurricane coverage. Will you aggressively support the Myrtle Beach station's efforts to change the FCC policy and mandate that Myrtle Beach stations be placed back on all cable and satellite systems? Don't need a lot on this. 10 seconds.
Absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt. I was in charge of having to be over evacuation of seniors and in nursing homes, which is a very volatile issue. And so without a shadow of a doubt, I'll be in favor of that.
Mr. Rice.
Absolutely. One more example of overreaching federal regulation that often is just completely nonsensical. Absolutely would be in favor of that.
Let's talk about I-73 real quick before we take a break. Of course, we can't avoid I-73. I think every debate you guys have probably been in, every interview you've done has touched on I-73. It's a road that's been talked about for more than 20 years. It's still not under construction. The bottom line is there's no money out there for it right now. If you get elected to go to Washington, assuming you support it, it's going to be part of your job to try to get that money back here. If you propose a toll road, you're going to have to get money to get it off the ground before the toll can start paying for it. If you want to do it through earmarks, well, you might violate something that you stand for. So let's start this question with Mr. Bauer. How do you feel about I-73? How will you get it here?
Well, number one, we need to finish 31 first. The fact that the federal government's gotten in and blocked that shows you we've got to have a congressman who's got some backbone to go up there and fight. Actually, when Obamacare was going on, I went up there to the Supreme Court and fought. But we've got to be very creative in how we fund things anymore. And that's why I've said, number one, we ought to shut down all the rest areas and then let private sector go in and operate businesses there like you see in so many other states. Instead of us paying the water bill, the power bill, the cleaning bill, let Chick-fil-A, McDonald's, Burger King, let them go in and open up a restaurant and then let them pay us rent. Number two, we have got to be firm in the fact that we cannot continue to be a donor state and pave roads in other states with our federal tax dollars. It's absolutely ridiculous. A poor rural state like South Carolina is subsidizing wealthier states, and so we've got to go up there and fight to get our fair money back that we're actually paying. And then number three, we've got to get more creative in how we acquire the land. And I've always said that we look and we come up with different ideas and approaches, and if you could actually go to a landowner and say, hey, look, we're going to come up with a creative way where you take less of a tax burden, or maybe no tax burden, but you in some way let us go ahead and acquire the land without fully paying you for it now. We can go ahead and spend our money on the engineering and the asphalt, and then over time pay them, but not have to let them acquire the taxes. And so it's a creative way to get the funding and let them be vested in part of the highway system.
Mr. Rice.
Well, one thing that I've heard Mr. Bauer say that many times, and I agree that you do need to get creative, but what you got to understand, Mr. Bauer, is that current federal tax law allows you to not pay taxes on what they call involuntary conversion or a condemnation, like the government taking it or buying it in the path of a roadway. It's already there. Somebody thought of that 50 years ago. But with respect to I-73, it's absolutely necessary. It's ridiculous that we don't have a road already. 14 million visitors coming in here every year. 90% come by car. 75% come off the I-95 corridor. I can't imagine having to evacuate this place on a busy summer weekend when we've got 600,000 to 800,000 people on the Grand Strand from Georgetown to North Carolina line. We've got one 4-lane road leading out of here. Now, infrastructure is not going to stop being built. It's not certainly going to be built at the rate it has been in the past. As you point out, we have very limited funds. We've got to get a hold of the deficit. But there is infrastructure that will be built, and it will be maintained or it'll crumble, and we'll be a third world country. Now, no more earmarks. Everything's got to compete based on merit. But Congress has already recognized the merit of I-73. They did it over 20 years ago. And what's happened? Nothing. We need a strong advocate for this district. You know, it's what I've done my whole life. It's what I'm doing on Horry County. It's what I'll do for you when you make me your next congressman.
15 seconds to rebut if you'd like.
I don't doubt he will. Some of his biggest donors own land where it's going.
15 seconds to rebut, and that's it on this.
That's ridiculous. I don't know who owns the land on I-73.
Oh, yes, you do.
And these donors are the same people he's calling for money every day.
Wait a minute, you just said you don't know who they are.
You say my big donor.
Wait a minute, you just said you didn't know. You know exactly who I'm talking about.
Tell me who you're talking about.
Some of your biggest donors.
Who?
Well, you called them out earlier today.
No, please tell me. I want to know who you're talking about, because then we'll find out if they really do own
Well,
land.
a lot of the people that have been donating to, a lot of the people that do business with county council that fear that even if you lose, you'll put your wrath of being chairman of county council on them. And so you follow the money. They can follow the money you've been given.
Well, you're not going to name any names, and we're not going to get any further
well,
on this right now.
I'm not going to name any names because it's the most powerful group in Myrtle Beach.
Who is it?
And there are hard penalties to pay for recognizing them.
Who is it?
You know exactly who they are, and all the listeners know exactly who they are.
Gentlemen, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about some of the broader national issues. We will be right back. This is Shark Tank, right? We'll be right back. Welcome back. Of course, this is the 7th Congressional District Debate. This is Andre Bauer. This is Tom Rice. I want to talk about some of the broader national issues. Any day now, the United States Supreme Court is expected to deliver their ruling on the health care law, the mandate that every individual buys health care. Of course, this is also known as Obamacare, but it's also called the Affordable Care Act. What do you think should be done about health care? Would you repeal Obamacare? And should something go in its place, Mr. Rice?
Absolutely, it needs to be repealed. It's too expensive. They're already saying it costs twice as much as they thought, and it'll be more expensive than that. It's too burdensome in terms of regulation, and it's a business killer. It creates uncertainty for business, and it's another one of these things that we were talking about earlier: overreach of the federal government. You know, I don't know about you, but I'm very afraid of the government taking control of health care. The government does very few things as well as private enterprise, and that's a worrisome thing to me.
Should government step in to control any of the rising costs of health care?
You know, in anything like that where there's, you know, for example, I would never say that we need to do away with the FDA. I mean, of course, there has to be some regulation to protect the public from dangers or unscrupulous things. But in terms of controlling the business, I think that they're reaching far too far. If we want to bring costs down, what we need to do is insert competition. We need to do what we can to promote competition between healthcare providers and with insurance companies. We need to let insurance companies compete across state lines. And then another thing we need to do is we need to look at reforming the physicians' malpractice laws so that doctors can stop practicing defensive medicine. And that runs the cost up and help hold those costs down.
Mr. Bauer, the same question for you. Should the health care law be repealed, and should anything be done by the government to stop the rising cost of health care, or should the government just play no part?
Absolutely. The government should not be involved. I actually went to the Supreme Court and actually participated in an event to try to get them not to do it. It is absolutely unbelievable to me how we continue to go away from traditional American values. We now see government overreaching once again. Number one, we have so many people not paying a thing for health care. Everybody needs to have skin in the game. Everybody should pay something, even if it's small, because what you have is abuse. You have people that may have an earache, and instead of going to a general practitioner, they'll go to an ER, which costs them fourfold or us fourfold what it should be. I actually, when I was in the legislature, proposed a bill that said we should have a $5 copay, because you'll see people come in with cell phones and brand new tennis shoes and everything else under the sun that they can afford to pay for, but they can't pay anything to go and abuse this healthcare system. Number two, we've got to get people more healthy. For the first time in the history of this country, the age is going down because people are abusing their bodies. We've got to look at what's happening. Number one, do we really want to send another lawyer to Washington? I think not. My goodness gracious, there's enough of them up there now. We got to have some tort reform up there. Doctors continue to have to do things to cover their own tail because they're worried about being sued. You ought to be able to buy insurance across state lines. There has to be more competition. But should we reward our doctors? Absolutely. I think the fact that we continue to cut our doctors scares me. I want the best, brightest that you can possibly have in the medical field. But above everything else, I want sharp people in there to make sure that we're able to be taken care of when we get there. And so I think there's a lot of things that government can tweak, but we really shouldn't be involved in making sure government doesn't have the right to provide everybody health care.
Let's talk about entitlements. That's a touchy subject. Social Security, Medicare. They're said to be running out of money at a quick rate. At this point, I think I'm a little bit scared of retiring right now, and as I imagine a lot of viewers are. How do you reform entitlements, Mr. Bauer?
Number one, you reward people to stay in the workforce longer and not take Social Security. maybe not have them pay taxes if they stay past retirement age. Get creative. Again, guy like me, I would say maybe under 50, raise the retirement age a few years. We know people are living longer than they had when they put this in place, much longer than when they put this in place, but yet we've continued to keep the same age number when you can collect. And so we've got to do things to rein that in. But also, you know, we've got to talk about these different programs where we continue to see bigger growth. I mean, clearly we have the food stamp president. We have grown the food stamp president. But whether it's aid to independent mothers, food stamps, welfare, we continue to see all these programs grow while government jobs are growing as well. And nobody wants to talk about it. I've been trying to engage in this discussion before. They actually want to make fun of me because the news media made fun of me. I think it's a real discussion that we have people continually, generation after generation, abusing the system. At some point in time, we're going to have to engage in the discussion, and people are going to be offended because anybody that's receiving goods and services from the government is offended if you want to take those away. But what about the people that can't make it to go get engaged and get all the freebies? They're working to pay for the freebies. Shouldn't they have rights? The fact that we continue to penalize the working class and reward the lazy, something's got to be done. And so entitlements are going to have to be looked at. We can't continue to pay out all these bills, and even furthermore, we can't continue to subsidize all these other countries. We've got to get back at home and take care of paying our bills first and foremost, and reining in that debt and reining in our spending. The fact that we're spending over $1.3 trillion every year, more than we bring in, is absolutely ludicrous. And it's why you need a business guy out there that's got some backbone to fight even the leadership of my own party if they want to continue to raise taxes. And it's what I did as a lieutenant governor of the state. Over $2 billion more you'd be paying in taxes, the South Carolinians, had I not fought those tax increases.
Mr. Rice, how do you reform entitlements?
Well, if you got to start by thinking about where we are today, and it is very, very scary. Most people don't realize that we're taking in $2.1 trillion a year in gross revenue for the entire country. We're spending $1.9 million on what they call mandatory spending or entitlements. That includes Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, SSI, food stamps, welfare, unemployment, all these things. These are things that are not appropriated by Congress annually. They're automatically done. $1.9 trillion out of our $2.1 total revenue. Then you add to that $300 billion, for the interest on the debt, and you're already at a deficit today. It's not 5 years from now. It's not 20 years from now. It's today. You're already at a deficit before you bought the first bullet, before you funded the Department of Defense, the Department of the Interior, the FBI, the CIA, the Homeland Security, the White House, the Congress, or anything else. So we've obviously got a huge monumental problem. And the only way you're going to solve it is with some serious restructuring in entitlements, tax reform, and spending caps. With respect to entitlements, with Social Security is the most common thing. Obviously, you're going to have to, for people who are already on it, that's a promise we've made, and we've got to learn to keep our promises. People who are on Social Security are very close to it. Nothing should change. People who are a little further away, maybe the retirement ages get delayed. There's probably going to have to be some means testing. There are plans out there that have been written. Tens of millions of dollars has been spent to develop. Brightest minds in the country. Paul Ryan, the Republican plan, the Pathway for Prosperity. That's one of them. The Bowles-Simpson plan, that was a bipartisan plan. It was commissioned by Obama, and he was scared to death of it when he got it. He stuck it on a shelf. Nothing's been done. But I tell you this. I'm really excited about the possibility of being there in January, because there are a number of things that are converging right now where for the first time in a decade or more, we really might have the possibility of getting some serious work done on our economy and our deficit. Number one, the Bush tax cuts are expiring. That's going to be a huge tax increase and a big drag on our economy. Number two, the payroll tax cuts are expiring. Number three, the automatic spending cuts from the debt ceiling negotiations are going to click in. Huge cuts in defense spending. All three of these things, nobody really wants to see them happen, but they're going to happen automatically unless something gets done. So plus there's going to be a whole new crop of legislators up there. Hopefully we'll have a new president. We really might have a chance, and it's not an election year, we really might have a chance next year to make some proactive steps and get something done. That's what I've done all my life. That's what I'm doing for you on Horry County Council right now. That's what I'll do for this whole district when I get elected, and that's what I'll do for you up there in Washington when you elect me.
Let's talk about immigration for a minute. Recently, President Barack Obama unveiled a plan that would give legal status to several illegal immigrants. How do you feel about that? Where do you stand on immigration? How would you approach things? How would you vote, Mr. Bauer?
Well, number one, you've got the President of the United States usurping Congress's power. This is illegal, and again, it shows what this president has done. It's absolutely ludicrous. But here lies the bigger problem. We continue to not do something about border. We're the only country in the world that continues to just not worry about it. And year after year, Ted Kennedy forgave a whole bunch of them, made them legal, and now we're talking about doing it again. Look, the first thing they did was break the law. The anchor baby, another big problem. We have got to address this. And to say, well, let's just make them legal, it's a bigger problem here. The bigger problem is that the reason why we have such an illegal immigration problem is we have a workforce problem. There are a lot of jobs that nobody wants to do anymore, and they're filling that void. If those jobs weren't vacant, we wouldn't have that problem. But we have raised the standard of living in this country so much, even to the people that don't do anything, that we've got to find somebody else to pick peaches and clean hotel rooms. And so what we have to do is we can't continue to have programs where people just absolutely do nothing and receive a paycheck. They need to fill some type of job. Look, there should be pride in a job. I worked on a farm. I know the pride in even getting that paycheck, even though it wasn't the greatest paycheck of my life, but you work your way and you find another job and a better job, and someday you own the job. And that's what America needs to be about. But just to continue to say you can sit at home, even if you're an able-bodied person, and draw a check for doing nothing is absolutely ridiculous. They ought to have to be in the military. They ought to have to clean our roads. They ought to have some type of gainful employment unless they are disabled. I have a big heart to help disabled people, but helping lazy people, I am fed up with it, and I think the American people are fed up with it. And that is why we have such an immigration problem, because they're coming here and filling jobs that nobody else wants to do.
Back to the question, any leniency for illegal immigrants?
I'd have to hear what the proposal is, but again, we are looking at a situation where we cannot afford it. We are continuing to pay for health care, education. English now as a second language is a big problem in the public schools in South Carolina, and it's why we have bigger and bigger problem in ranking nationally. And so again, if we continue to show leniency, which we've been doing for years, we're going to continue to have the problem. At some point in time, you have got to stand firm in what you believe and say we can't keep having people come over the border. And as a congressman, I will fully fund helping those governors who have reached out, and the president has fought them every time. Something's got to be done about it.
Mr. Rice.
I'm absolutely not in favor of amnesty in any form. I agree with Mr. Bauer that until we control the borders, that we're not going to solve any problem. That's the first step. And second, I don't think we need any laws. We simply need to enforce the laws we've got. We've got perfectly good laws on the books. The federal government simply has refused to enforce them. So, and so the states, out of frustration, like Arizona, like Alabama, like South Carolina, step up and set up their own laws. And you know, really, immigration should be a national issue. I mean, that's one of the few things that I think under the Constitution should be a federal issue. But the federal government refuses to enforce the laws on its books. Now, if they're not going to do it, then get out of the state's way. You know, don't challenge our immigration law. The federal government, again, inserting its nose into every aspect of our lives. They challenge our immigration law. They challenge our voter ID law. They have the National Labor Relations Board sue us because they don't like Boeing coming into South Carolina. You know, the world's gone crazy. We've gotten so very, very far away from the limited government that our framers intended. Everybody's forgotten about the 10th Amendment. With respect to, you know, the welfare issue Mr. Bauer raised, I totally agree that it is completely out of hand. Welfare has got to be reformed. I don't mind one bit the idea of drug testing as a requirement for welfare. I don't mind one bit the idea that they should have educational requirements or work requirements for able-bodied people before they can get on the government dole. Totally agree with that.
We just have a few more minutes left in this section of the questioning, and I want to talk about foreign policy. If we look at the Mideast right now, which is really what dominates most foreign policy discussion, we see what's happening in Syria on the brink of civil war. We see Iran possibly developing a nuclear weapon. We have the war in Afghanistan winding down, just wound down the war in Iraq. What's going right with our foreign policy? What's going wrong with our foreign policy? How would your votes go if you were up in Washington? Let's start with Mr. Rice on this one.
Well, we can no longer afford to be the world's policeman. If you'll recall the numbers I gave you earlier, just with the entitlement programs and the interest on the debt, we're already in a deficit before we pay one dime for the Department of Defense. We simply can't afford it. Now, with respect to where we are in Afghanistan, and I meant to do this earlier and I'm sorry I forgot, the National Guard group from Timmonsville was bombed yesterday, and 3 South Carolina residents were killed and 5 were severely injured, and we should just acknowledge that. If it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be sitting here doing this right now. We wouldn't be enjoying the freedom that we have. But and their sacrifice needs to be honored. We can't just pull out of Afghanistan with willy-nilly and throw away everything that they've done. What we've got to do is we've got to listen to our military leaders, because they're the ones who know what's happening on the ground. They're the ones with the expertise to decide when we need to get out of there. I certainly don't have that expertise, and I would ask their counsel before I made any decision on that.
All right. Mr. Bauer?
Right off the bat, we ought to get out of the UN. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. They are headed down a road that, as a conservative, I don't believe in. Again, we can't continue to be the world's policing force. Europe ought to be thankful for us every day, because we take such a burden off the Europeans for them not having to pay for so many military and people that are actually over there. But we are in Germany, Italy, Japan, so many of our allies countries. We've got to get out of there. We shouldn't be paving roads in other countries. We shouldn't be doing building parks and buildings and unbelievable embassies. I mean, Afghanistan, we should have never gone there in the first place. Here we have a religious problem that's been going on for thousands of years. We go over there and shed treasure and blood. It's absolutely ridiculous. And as soon as we're gone, you're going to have the same problem again. There are clearly places that are a danger. We should protect Israel, because they are our friend and they are in a strategic place where we need cover. But we should only pick places that are the absolute dire importance for us to be. We should have the best aircraft in the world. We should have the best Navy in the world. But what you see now is a procurement process whereby by the time something's approved, it's dated. So we don't have the best aircraft in the world anymore, and we are being outdone by so many other Air Force countries. And so we've got to reprioritize what we do. I think it's too political. Number one, that's about number 3 or 4, we shouldn't have the media anywhere we're battling a war. It is dangerous. Our enemies are getting our secrets, and if I could pass a law, I would vote to take the media totally out of anywhere we have troops that are risking their lives, because too many of our secrets are given to our enemy, and that should absolutely stop immediately. Also, these men and women that go over there, they need to be compensated. We continue to cut out the very people that sacrifice their lives. When we tell them we're going to do something for them, we've got to stick to doing it, and we should not shortchange these folks. But we have folks that took guard duty and went over to do temporary things that are on their 3rd and 4th time of being over there. That is not right. We are wearing our soldiers thin, and we have them in absolutely too many places. We're going to have to cut back. We're going to have to reprioritize as a country what our real military plan is.
All right.
I want to point out one thing that he said, and there's several things he said that I wouldn't disagree with, but one in particular. When those people in Afghanistan, when we have a small terrorist army over there, send their troops over here and kill 3,000 of our people, I certainly think that we needed to respond to that. There's no question in my mind that we did right to respond to that. Now, should we have been here as long as we have? That's a different story. But I absolutely think that we should have gone into Afghanistan to respond to the 9/11 attacks.
That's about a 20-second rebuttal.
I agree with him to a certain degree. We should have our CIA and our military over there. We should have special forces that go in and take these folks out. But to send all these troops over there, absolutely not. Only special forces, CIA, that we go in and take out just the terrorists and then get out of there.
All right. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we've got some excellent viewer questions I want to throw at you guys, and if time allows, have a closing statement. We will be right back. Welcome back to the 7th Congressional District Debate. Let's just skip over all the pleasantries and get right to this great viewer question. This came from Jeffrey Tadlock, and he says, as a college student majoring in elementary education, I am particularly concerned with our current education system. America's falling behind other countries in all core subjects. Also, we seem to be losing arts in our schools because it seems funding's not available. If you're elected, then how will you see to it that our current system's improved, and what are you going to do to follow through with your ideas? Mr. Bauer, what do you think about education, what Mr. Tadlock had to say?
Number one, all the issues involving education ought to be back in South Carolina. I trust our Secretary of Education way more than I trust Barney Frank to make decisions on South Carolinians get educated. We've got to have discipline back in schools. You've got to have parents back in schools. There has to be some structure. Teachers need to have the authority to remove students. We need more alternative schools to send kids that can't continue to get it done in the current environment and setting. There have got to be substantive changes, but we've got to educate people for the jobs, not to take tests that the federal government puts out. English is a second language. No Child Left Behind needs to be done away with. There are a multitude of things we've got to change to get our schools back in the order they need to be. But we've got to have them training for jobs that are out there, not training to be test takers.
Mr. Rice.
Well, this is another example of overregulation by the federal government. A lot of these questions come back to that. No Child Left Behind and these federal mandates, they handcuff the teachers into training for tests. Decisions need to be made at a local level, and really right down to the parents. Parents should have the option to send their kids to, not to send their kids to failing schools. These decisions need to be made locally.
All right. I want to move to this question. This came from Joe Dugan, who's also the head of the Myrtle Beach Tea Party. He said in 2010, Jim DeMint and all of our Republican congressmen signed the Contract from America. Have you or will you sign it? And if not, which provisions do you oppose? I have a list of the provisions here if you all are not familiar with it. I believe this one goes to Mr. Rice first.
I've signed it and sent it back to him. He knows that.
Okay. Mr.
I've
Ballard?
signed it as well.
Okay. Let's move on to a question from, and I hope I'm saying this right, Emil Kepke. He's a frequent commenter on my Facebook page. He says, my question is, how would you work with the other side to lead our country into the future? A lot of people talk about the polarization in Washington. Do you think it needs to be changed, or do you think Republicans need to stick to their guns up there?
Depends on what the issue is. When I was lieutenant governor, aging, I was able to get all sides to come together because they cared about what we did with our senior population, our growing senior population. This is the biggest state, the biggest county in the state for in-migration. And so I was able to come off the podium, walk over to the House of Representatives and convince them that we had to do things to protect senior fraud, protect senior evacuation. And so we did things like that, and I'll do them in Washington. Am I going to give up my conservative principles? Absolutely not. If we have to shut the government down and only provide core services, will I do that? As a congressman, you betcha. Republicans have got to show leadership in Washington, and we cannot back down to a bunch of liberals that want to give this country away.
Mr. Rice.
This country is in an absolutely critical crossroads. I would like to think that come January there's going to be a Republican president. We're going to have 61 senators that are Republicans and a majority of the House. But realistically, that's not very likely. We have got to reach a proactive agreement next year, I believe, to, again, reform entitlements, to reform the tax code, flatten and simplify, and to cut spending, cut cap and balance. And that is going to require us some level of working together. Again, we need a strong advocate. It's how I've made my living. It's what I'm doing right now on Horry County Council. It's what I'm going to do for the whole district. It's what I'm going to do for the country when you send me up there as your representative.
Here's a question, came from Harriet Clark Herndon. Realistically, what do you really think you can accomplish in 2 years as a junior congressman, given that the first year will be finding your way around and the second will be running for re-election? Mr. Rice, we'll start with you on this one.
Well, I'm sure that that's going to be a challenge. You know, we'll be one of 435 people. But a voice, one of 435, can absolutely be heard. We've got a very, very strong conservative South Carolina delegation, and I'm very much looking forward to working with them to bring about effective change. And what Mr. Bauer referred to earlier with respect to the debt ceiling negotiations, last August when they stood and would not sign that agreement, I would have stood with them.
Mr. Bauer.
We agree on that. Right off the bat, when you look at what I did as lieutenant governor, I went in as a 32-year-old young man and said, I will do something with the office of lieutenant governor. I convinced the General Assembly to give it to me on a year trial basis. After a year, they made it permanent law. Now, whomever the lieutenant governor is has the office on aging because it was such a huge success. I did that as a young man, at 32 years old. And so I can tell you, to go into the United States Congress, I will convince them we've got to have substantive change. I actually have appeared before Congress not once, but twice. I went up there once when a company in this district, if I hadn't been fighting for this district a long time, I went up and fight when Nucor Steel was being cheated by Turkish companies that were being subsidized by their government, and we were talking about losing American jobs. I went up there on my own dime and spoke before the United States Congress. So I am familiar with the process. I am familiar with some of the players in there, and I will go in as more than a freshman member. I'll go in there as somebody that's actually been there, fought there, and actually has a relationship with some of the individuals there.
Time now for the last question. If you watch Carolina this week, this is always my last question to you guys. You have about 45 seconds or so to answer. We'll start with Mr. Bauer. Why should I vote for you?
I have a proven track record, Tim, of going and fighting against the establishment. I did it in Columbia. I'll do it in Washington. Folks know that I don't back down. I didn't back down here when I had a big group against me. I won't back down in Washington. I've got a proven record of being a constituent service person as well, and we will do all we can to make people feel better about what their government does for them. I'm excited about the fact that going to Washington and actually having some backbone to stand up to even my own Republican leadership and working with Tim Scott, Mick Mulvaney, Jeff Duncan, folks that have been stewards of good taxpayer leadership, and I want to work with them to show that South Carolina can put the rest of the country on the map for the most conservative delegation in the United States Congress.
Mr. Rice.
My friends, I grew up in this district. I've raised my family in this district. My wife and Renzi of 30 years and I have raised our boys here. I built my business in this district. I have deep, deep roots here. I've been a strong advocate for my clients. I've been a strong advocate for Horry County, and I want to be a strong advocate for this district. This district's been left behind for decades. I can help. Give me your vote, honor me with your vote, and I can help.
All right. Well, that's just going to about wrap up our debate tonight. I want to thank former Lieutenant Governor Andre Bauer for being here, and our current Horry County Council Chairman, Tom Rice, for coming here.
And I want to thank Tom. It's been a good election.
Thank you.
There you go, a handshake.
All right.
Thanks a lot, Andre. We will see you back here on Sunday morning for Carolina This Week. We'll see you here tonight at 11 o'clock for News Channel 15 at 11. We will have a wrap-up of this debate, and I want to encourage everybody to head to the polls on Tuesday to vote in either the Republican or now we've learned the Democratic runoff. We'll see you back here at 11 o'clock tonight. Good night.